they're so difficult. So Yukta, actually, because it's Sunday morning, and I do appreciate all the multiple commitments that everybody has. So you can let participants know they can, people can join in whenever it's convenient for them. Usually, it's a good idea to join within the first couple of minutes, so that we don't have to do multiple recaps. But given that it's a Sunday morning and people do have other commitments, so you can join whenever it's convenient. We'd also understand if you need to leave in between and come back. So feel free to do all of that. And I'll just hope that you will be able to join us for some parts during the 3-hour session. And you'll be able to get some benefits, as it were, or some value, out of the exercise. All right. So we spoke about value yesterday in the context of reservation value, of course. We take forward the conversation today. And I'm going to do a couple of things in this session. But while we are fresh and while we have our interest somewhat alive, I think what we're going to do is we will go ahead and introduce the new topic. The new topic, which is the human element, right? So this is not a new topic, it's a related topic, but new for the module that we are doing here. One of the things that I feel when I think of this is there are two broad approaches to think about this. One is that the human factor, we are all human beings and we understand this. And it's all very abstract. You really cannot really do this in any kind of organized way, right? And the other is actually to touch base with a lot of the research and a lot of the work with the experts who work in this domain and see what they have to say. And to at least understand how these factors can affect what we are talking about, which is negotiations. That is our focal area. Okay. What I find to be a problem with either of the two approaches is this. If I take the intuitive route, I can very easily begin to say that I understand it and there is nothing much to be done, or I'm a good human being and I'm naturally talented to do this, or the other person has got this kind of an emotional problem and therefore nothing can be done. It is very easy to use that as a remainder item, as kind of a catch-all exit route. Whenever nothing happens, we say, there's a human factor at work and we can do nothing about it. In other words, it will become somewhat of a cynical point of view. And that doesn't take us much ahead. The second option of looking at what the experts say is also not without a problem. And the fundamental reason I believe it is not a problem is because it's a very complex topic. And in spite of the research, it is my sense, and I believe that some other people think as well, that we know very little of the human mind and human emotions. Human emotions and the human mind and the human heart even more is extremely difficult to understand. So it is good to have that caution in our mind as we look at the results of the research. Now, rather than to see this as a toolkit, 1, 2, and 3. This is what the research has done. Somebody's won the Nobel Prize, and therefore this is it. I think it is good to understand that, okay, this is all very good research. It's good to have the knowledge, but to apply your mind.
Just in lighter vein, can we use some other word than the toolkit? Because that is some alarming.
No, Mr. Bhatnagar, you'll have to allow me to teach. I've been teaching for more than 30 years. You've been giving me lessons on pedagogy from session 1. If you want to be teaching the session,
is coming often.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bhatnagar, you'll have to allow me to do my job. I believe that I know my job. You've been telling me from session 1 different interventions on, whether it's a Venn diagram or the other thing.
Sir.
No, not a matter of sorry, because that interferes with the running of the session. I would welcome your challenge to ideas. I would be very happy to have your experience. But if you start telling me on how to teach a session, then it becomes extremely difficult. If you wish to do it, you, of course, have all the freedom to run your own sessions. Okay, so now we are going to go ahead and talk about what is the human element. And Yukta, are you there in the session?
Yes, I'm there.
Yeah. So would you please bring up the toolkit? Would you bring up the slide? See how much it interferes with the flow of thought? Because you make these absolutely wonderful interventions from your point of view, but it doesn't seem wonderful to me at all. Because toolkit has the meaning of a toolkit. Yeah, I've been teaching for more than 30 years. So I'm not a rookie at this thing. So when I use the toolkit, I do know that I want to say toolkit. If I wanted to see it's something else, I would say it. Right. And if you want to take this discussion on pedagogy, it's got to be off the session. It completely interferes with the flow of the session, and it's not fair to me. It's not fair to anybody else. Yeah, please bring up the PPT.
Yes, just give me a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to begin with the human element. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The human fact. Okay, so I'm going to be right away. No, go back to the human factor. Now, what I want to do is, Yukta, can you just pull out of the slide right away by showing this and then coming out? How many of you notice the slug line, which is the text written in smaller letters just below the session type? And if you did notice, what did it say? Did
Sir,
anybody
it is about
notice?
emotional intelligence in negotiation.
Absolutely, yes, Sabangi. Emotional intelligence in negotiations. What is emotional intelligence? This is a term which is used by a lot of people around nowadays. And it's a smart thing to say, but anybody has a sense of what is emotional intelligence? What do we mean by emotional intelligence? We know of intelligence. Nowadays, of course, a lot of people are talking about artificial intelligence, which is a whole different world. But what is emotional intelligence?
Is it a type of thing that emotions we can be used intelligently to pursue any particular person or manner?
Broadly, at a very fundamental level, the answer is yes. Yes. But it is a very specific term which came up at a point, in academics and outside of it. And there's a book called Emotional Intelligence as well. And it means something very specific. The argument which was placed and which people believe is that in order to be successful in life or to do a whole lot of things, only IQ tests are not important. It is also important to understand what is emotional intelligence, whether a person is blessed with emotional intelligence or not. If a person does not have emotional intelligence, then that person is not able to be broadly successful in life or understand many situations. It is not enough to be just able to do the numbers or know the formula. You have to also, as a human being, display the intelligence to understand other human beings and to work with them. That's broadly the idea. Okay. Now, we are going to look at how this comes into play in negotiations. Before I open up the slide, would somebody hazard a guess as to how emotions make you more intelligent? What is the kind of intelligence that allows you to be emotionally intelligent? What does it mean? What could it mean? Somebody would say my emotions are emotions, is right brain and left brain and all of that. So emotions are separate, my intelligence is separate. But here it is, we are talking about emotions also being linked to a kind of intelligence. So your intelligence has one aspect, which is emotional intelligence. And if you don't have that, the rest of your intelligence will not work. So they've done research and experiments with small children, tracking them from almost their birth or pre-kindergarten years right up to the age of 20, and found that children were found to display more emotional intelligence and lesser IQ. Later on in life, they are more successful in leading a life. What does an emotional intelligence mean? Anybody has a thought? I don't expect you to have a refined thought or a right answer necessarily, or something which is from the textbooks. I don't expect you to Google this also. Just from your intuitively, what could it mean? We all know the meaning of the word intuitions, emotions. Let me give you an example. A couple of minutes earlier in the session, in response to an intervention by one of the participants, you did see me being a bit upset and unhappy. That unhappiness or being upset might have shown up on the expressions in my face and definitely the tone of my voice and my overall manner. In response to that manner and expressions, other people amongst the participants also would have experienced a certain kind of emotion. Those other people are people like you. And that has again, in turn, shown up on my screen as varied facial expressions. For those who have the video on, and for others who don't, I do not know. Now, if we were to go further with that, and we were to enter after this into a negotiation, would it affect? Would the atmosphere
Yes.
in the room and the emotions, would it affect our negotiations?
Yes, it will affect.
Right. For instance,
Mm,
the intervention was
may
made
I
by,
further say?
yeah, just 1 second, Mr. Uncle. If the intervention was made by Mr. Bhattnagar, now supposing Mr. Bhattnagar and me enter into a negotiation in the next 20 minutes, and in the first couple of minutes, would this affect? And what are we going to do to make it not affect? One of the things we could do to not make it affect is to recognize that this could be a carryover. In other words, every negotiation, there's an example, has a legacy. When you go into a negotiation, there's a legacy which is individual, there's a legacy which is institutional, organizational, and it's good to understand that. We do not negotiate or talk to people in a vacuum. There's an environment, there's an atmosphere. And it's not right to pretend that it does not exist there. We'll also talk about the nature of conflict and how to manage it, and how that is interwoven with negotiations. Okay, Mr. Arun Kumar.
Normally, whenever there is emotional overflow, then what I consider that uh, any that particular person intelligence goes down normally, and he is not able to take appropriate decision. So what I consider emotional intelligence is that the less the effect of emotion is there on you at the time of at the time of negotiation, better you will be in negotiation. That is what I thought.
That is about your understanding. Fair enough. Anybody has any other answer? We'll deal. I'll respond to it after we bring up some of the ideas, and I'll remember to come back to it. But that's good that
Sure.
you shared with us your understanding of what it is. As I said, as of now, we haven't opened up any of the slides. What is your understanding? That was my question, and thank you, Mr. Arun Kumar, for sharing your perception of that. Anybody else?
Yes,
I
sir.
can only. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Venkat Krishnan.
See, emotional, at times when you're emotional, what happens is we tend to get a feeling of anger. Now that will have a mental kind of a mental blocking to proceed with further things. So that may, what happens, your focus on what you need to discuss may get diverted. Then what happens is we lose that. We lose the track of it. So emotional intelligence is where, you whatever there are deviations, you try to bring it back and you focus on what you want to do. So person who's successful.
You're almost on the same lines as what Mr. Arun Kumar is also saying, isn't it? It's on the same lines, not exactly the same, but on the same lines. All right, we'll just respond to it in a bit. Okay, anybody else wants to come in with a response about how you understand this whole idea of emotional intelligence? We have not formalized anything. We have not said anything as yet in terms of concepts, anything on the slide. Just a conversation. Yeah, Vijay, you want to say something?
Yeah, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Sir, basically, when I think about the emotional intelligence, I find these two words, just I keep them separate, emotion and intelligence. I may be intelligent to some extent when I know how to do this, how it can be said, how it can be processed in my mind, what is the raw data, how I process that, and where I have to say, when I have to say all those things. Now, in that case, the emotion become a kind of catalyst. It changes my perception to some things, and I know what to do, I know what to say, but when emotion is added in my mind, somehow these thoughts and the way of my expression changes. So when the emotions are there in your mind, how to show your intelligence, how to express that, that is the part what I think that emotional intelligence teaches us.
Okay, all right. I'm listening to all of you. I'll try to remember the differences in what you say. I may not do a good job at remind me when I respond back. You all seem to be till now the three responses, and I'm going to be coming to Mr. Bhattnagar in a bit and to Sandeep as well. all of you seem to be saying a couple of things. One is that emotions is a separate thing, and the job to be done during the negotiation is separate. The job to be done during the negotiations is essentially a job which requires you to be rational and keep your emotions aside, or to be in control of emotions. If you're not in control of your emotions, if you're not in control of your anger, for instance, it'll interfere from your functioning during the negotiations. So that is more or less what I have taken off from the comments till now. But if I were to run through all the three comments, okay, I'm going to, and I may have summarized it wrong, might have missed out on some of the subtleties, and I will go back to you when I do that. Mr. Bhatnagar, and then Sandeep. Sandeep, should I call you Mukta or Sandeep? What do you prefer? I'm more used to Sandeep than Mukta. Whatever people call you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Bhatnagar, first your point of view, and then Sandeep. Go ahead.
Sir, in negotiation, there are always two parties. So understanding the emotions, our own emotions, as well as the emotions of the other party, and respond to the emotions appropriately, controlling our own emotions and giving befitting responses to the emotions of others, respecting them. That I mean that it is emotional intelligence.
Very good. You'd find that when I open up the slides and go on to the concepts, out of what you said, one part of it will be directly aligned to what we are talking about in terms of the concept, and the other part needs a slight adjustment. But broadly, yes. I think the additional point that you're bringing into the conversation, and that's the point I'm saying that is aligned with what we're going to be presenting, is to also look at the emotions of the person on the other side of the table. So emotional intelligence is fundamentally about also your ability to understand the emotions, the possible emotions or the actual emotions of the other party with whom you're negotiating. Of course, it is important to understand yourself, recognize your own emotions. Okay, so that's essentially what we're doing. So thank you, Mr. Bhatnagar. That was a very good intervention. And Sandeep, would you come in now?
Actually, I was having the view same as Bhatnagar sir. It's the ability to understand the emotions of others as well, not only us. And I was reading one book on ethics actually by Dr. D.K. Balaji. So there's a chapter on emotional intelligence. I would like to quote it like, he has defined emotional intelligence as application of states of mind for fruitful purposes. So this is the book actually I'm reading. So
okay.
I would.
Okay, thank you, Sandeep. So I'm going to just say this before I open up. So there is actually a book, and that's a classic, and that's Emotional Intelligence. And that book actually brought up this whole term, and it has a specific meaning and a specific way of evaluating people for their emotional intelligence. And in some of the jobs that you do nowadays, or in some of the positions that you hire to do, or even other purpose for education, people would check out the emotional intelligence of people and their differences. Right. So there's a way in which it does. It essentially, emotional intelligence is about our ability to be self-aware, to understand our own emotions. That's one end of it. And the other is to have the empathy to both understand and appreciate the emotions of the other side. Okay, so in commonsensical, simple words, that is what it is. All right. Let me give you a small story from chapter 1 of the book Emotional Intelligence. And that story runs like this. There are two very small children, and one is, I think, about 2 years old, and the other is 4 years old. It is from an actual experiment that they did. I read this years back, so the age I might mix up. It's, I think, about around 2 years and 4 years. So the story begins first by the 2-year-old actually being beaten up by the 4-year-old. His elder brother comes and hits him. All right. The mother comes and begins to scold the elder child. Why have you beaten your younger brother? The mother scolds the elder one so much that the elder child, who's 4 years old, begins to cry. Within a couple of minutes, the 2-year-old goes and begins to console the 4-year-old. The 2-year-old is now consoling his elder brother, who is now crying. This was seen as an instance of the emotional intelligence of the younger child, because at 2 years, it is not very often to see such kind of an ability to appreciate, understand that somebody else is feeling sad and to try and console as well. The other experiment that they did was they put some chocolates. And this was again in front of about 3-year-olds, all kindergarten children. And the two potential offers. If you go and want to have the chocolate now, you're allowed to do that. You can do that. But you will get one chocolate. However, if you wait for 2 hours and don't go now, you're going to get 2 chocolates. What you found out of about 50 children, I forget the exact number, the total number of children who are in this experiment, some of them would immediately run and go for that one chocolate and have it. There'd be others you could see struggling to hold back. And slowly they would succumb to this struggle. They cannot wait for 2 hours. Before 2 hours, they would go there and they would begin to have the chocolates. They'll have one chocolate they're getting it. There'll be a very small number who would be struggling. You could see the struggle, because for a 3-year-old, having a chocolate that you like to have in front of you and still not have it is a very big act of mental toughness. So there was a small number who would wait and wait and wait. And finally, after 2 hours, they would go and they would get their 2 chocolates. These children were tracked over the next 20 years, as I told you earlier in the session. And it was found that the children who were able to be patient, to wait, and finally get the 2 chocolates, they did far, far better in terms of the outcomes in their life compared to the ones who didn't. Also, if I recall this right, some of these children actually scored less in the regular IQ test. So the point that the authors were making was that certain kinds of abilities, by being self-aware, being in control of your emotions, being able to understand other people's emotions or empathy, actually have a direct bearing on your ability to lead life, to be successful. I'm looking at some messages popping up on the chat. I'm usually not very good at keeping track of the chat while I'm speaking. Yukta, I would request you to keep track of the chat, and at some point we'll break and look at that and respond to it. I think the last message popping up, what is the name of the book? The name of the book is Emotional Intelligence. It is a classic. Emotional Intelligence, I think Daniel Coleman. Yeah, it's by Daniel Coleman. Okay.
Sir,
So this is the classic. So a lot of people keep on using that term. A lot of people have done other books on it, but this is the seminal work. The seminal work is a huge part of work on that. With this, I think I'm about to begin to look at the slides because we've got other business to do today. We are nearing 11:30 as of now, but I did hear a gentleman trying to intervene. And please go ahead, whoever, I didn't notice who it was, but please go ahead and say what you have to.
sir, it's me, sir, Siddharth.
Hello, Siddharth. How are you?
Hi, sir. Sir, what is the book name, sir? Like, I couldn't catch that.
Emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence. Okay. So Yukta can put it on the chat. Emotional intelligence. Daniel Coleman. Perhaps Yukta can do a quick Google and give a link as well if somebody needs later on, or I will if we haven't got it till then. Okay. So let's go ahead with it and let's see how this impacts. There's a lot of research at the moment still taking off. Okay, I've been even reading up for your session today morning to check what is the current state of this. The current state of this is there's a lot of research going on about this whole emotions and the human factor, how it comes in with negotiations. Some people have done work on this, winning prizes as big actually as the Nobel Prize. Okay, so this is extremely important in decision making and all of these other things. So we talk about all of these things, but first let's look at the slides and let's look at fundamentally what this is about. So I would request Yukta to bring up the slide that we just saw earlier, which is saying the human element. Understanding the human factor and emotional intelligence, that's what we are here to talk about now for the next probably about half an hour at least, or more. Emotional intelligence actually has these 5 elements. Okay, so this is formal. This is not something which is guesswork. So at the moment, this is intuition, which is good. We just spoke about our intuition, about what it is. Now let's look at formally what it is. The first is self-awareness. It is easy to say that I understand self-awareness, but it is very, very difficult to become self-aware. You can spend a lifetime becoming really self-aware. Second is about self-regulation. You become aware of your own emotions. What are the triggers for your own emotions? How do you actually regulate it? It is one thing for me to realize that I get upset or angry about something. It is not completely a different challenge for me to be able to regulate that. The third challenge, of course, is I have to ask myself and know myself that if I were to regulate themselves in the sense of controlling it, of not giving vent to it, not expressing myself, is that healthy? Is that honest? So when some of you did say that, all right, if I can just control and not bring my anger, I've always asked myself over the years that if anger was so dysfunctional, and it is sometimes, and many a times, then why is it there at all? Or is it like a safety valve that if I actually express it sometimes in the right way and with the guardrails there, then does it actually take away the pressure from me in some way? So what is my, and this might be different for different people. So this whole business of self-regulation, how do I deal with it? The I underlined, it would not be necessarily the same for everybody. What is my awareness of my emotions? What are my principal emotions at work, usually in different situations? As I gain more experience of life, I get to know, understand it. What are the triggers? What are the reasons why I tend to experience certain emotions more than the others, whether it is joy and happiness, or anger, or sadness, or disgust, or whatever it is, or fear for that matter. The third bullet point is about motivation. What motivates me? It's extremely important. What motivates me? Motivation can happen because of multiple factors. Now, the motivation is different for different people. Motivation becomes important in any situation, including negotiations, but not only negotiations. What is my motivation for doing this job? What is my motivation to come into this negotiation? What is the difference between interest and motivation? I need to think about that. The example from session one about the gentleman who was not happy with outsourcing a contract because he thought that he will not get enough credit. What is his motivation to actually be in this negotiation? Is it to get more credit and a promotion? Or is it actually to do something which is going to be good for his organization? What is his interest? The interest could be something specific to the topic of the negotiation. What is of interest to the organization? What is the business interest? So the motivation here would be more individual and would connect more to your own individual life as a person. Empathy, a supremely important word, and we are going to be expanding on that a bit. What is empathy is not sympathy. What is empathy? And then finally, social skill. What are the social skills that you develop, the skills that you have to be a member of a society, to interact with other people, to have healthy relationships, and so on and so forth. I'm going to pull out of this slide again and begin to talk to you a little bit about empathy. Yukta, can you take us out of the slide? What is empathy? And I give you a hint by saying that it is not sympathy. Did you ever see or hear of a film, a 70s film, an art house film called Sparsh, Nasiruddin Shah? In that film, it was about people who are challenged. They cannot speak and they cannot hear. Okay. Sorry, I think they were about, no, I'm sorry, it's many years back. I think they're visually challenged. And there is a scene, the principal of the school is Nasiruddin Shah, if I recall this right. And he's also visually challenged like the other children. And there's somebody who comes in with very good intentions, working for some kind of a social organization. And she says something in the sentence saying, "Hum un becharo ke liye kuch karna chahte." Bechara, she says. And the principal, which is Nasiruddin Shah, is himself visually challenged. He cannot see. He says, "Pehli baat, yahan koi bechara na." ये समझ लीजिए यहाँ कोई भी बेचारा नहीं. Right? Sympathy sometimes is about actually, it is good, but sometimes people can think it is showing pity for somebody. It is becoming a bit patronizing, and some people don't like it. So there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. We're talking about empathy. What is empathy? If this is sympathy and empathy is different from sympathy, what might be empathy? From first principles, without Googling, what would you think empathy would be? Remember what we said just before I opened up the slide. This is about understanding yourself. We saw that on the slide now. It is all about yourself. And it's about also understanding the other side, being aware of who is on the other side, that person.
So may I attempt?
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
So I think empathy is the ability to put
But
yourself.
I cannot see whoever is speaking.
Sir, I'm Tanis speaking. So I'll turn on my camera.
Can you please do that? Can you please do? It's so much nicer to the camera is on.
So give me 30 seconds. I'll be back.
Yeah. So maybe in the meantime, somebody else can. Mr. Bhatnagar has raised his hands. Yes, Mr. Bhatnagar, please go ahead, and then we can come to Tanay after that. Go ahead.
Sir, if you permit me, then according to me, empathy is putting ourselves in the shoes of others and understanding perception from his point of view, rather
You're right.
than
Yeah,
your own point
yes.
of view.
Yes, absolutely perfect. So it is putting myself from seeing the world from the other person's point of view, understanding with a certain degree of compassion that what that would be, right? So it's not sympathy. I'm not saying I'll do it for you. You'll do it yourselves. I'm not trying to say that I'm greater than you and I can help you and I can sympathize, but I just understand you. Just understand it. Sometimes when somebody is actually going through a very difficult time, I think the best that you can do sometimes is just to keep quiet and just listen carefully, because a lot of people just don't listen. Listen, give your full attention to that person. It's just understanding what is it that you are feeling. All of us have gone through the very difficult process of either dealing with our own ultimate grief of losing somebody. And I believe that till you lose somebody, you don't know. Why I say this, before I lost my father, I always thought I understood what is death. As I went and expressed my condolences and told people that I understand how you're feeling. But the moment I lost my father, not even one moment before that, although I was getting ready for this in my mind, I thought I was getting ready for it. I don't think I understand what death means. So when you express your condolences when somebody has gone through that ultimate grief, you cannot, usually, for most of us, you cannot do anything about it. But you can do a lot in terms of understanding where the person is at the moment. Right? So you're entirely right, Mr. Bhatnagar. It's about understanding and putting yourself in the shoes of others, seeing the world from the other person's point of view. Tanay, now we come to you, and thank you for taking the trouble to have the video on, and that is very nice to see you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Please go.
Good afternoon, sir. So largely, yes, that was going to be my answer as well. The ability to put ability to be ourselves into their shoes. But so on that note, I have a question on what you have said as well. If empathy is to have the ability to be or to put ourselves into the other person's shoes, then would that indicate or does that mean that being sympathetic is having more emotional intelligence than being an empathetic individual? Sir,
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I wouldn't say this. I wouldn't say this. I don't claim to be an expert on sympathy and empathy. I do it. I touch base with it from the point of view of the domain that I'm working in. But my sense is it is not a question of quantitatively the degree. That you have empathy. If you're on a scale of 1 to 10, you're at 6, and if you have sympathy, you're on 8. I wouldn't see it that way. I think sympathy is probably qualitatively different. It is not necessarily bad. It depends on the situation. However, in many, many situations, especially professional ones, if you were to express sympathy, somebody else might think that you're being intrusive, because they think that I can deal with the situation myself. I don't need your sympathy. I can help myself. Don't try to be patronizing. But empathy is more restrained, is more professional. I don't need to involve myself with your emotion. If you feel sad, I don't need to feel sad with you. As long as I can understand that you are sad and you're feeling sad, that's good enough. I do not need to feel angry because you're feeling angry with a particular situation. I may also have a different perception of it. But if I recognize that you are angry, and if I'm also aware with compassion that why you might be angry, that might be good enough for me. A doctors are a lot in the news at the moment. We've all dealt with doctors. Doctors, many of them, when they're speaking with the families, many of them have the empathy. Unfortunately, some or many do not have the empathy. The conversation is about almost a business conversation. Well, this is a very different situation. If you're a doctor, you're dealing with a family which is about to lose somebody, then what is required is empathy. You are not expected to feel the impending grief or the sadness with every patient you're dealing. Everybody understands you're dealing with so many patients, but you're expected as a doctor or nurse to understand what these people are going through. And that is why when they get certain kinds of medical certifications, I believe like MRCP of the UK, there's a whole module on communication, how do you communicate? But is it a toolkit? No, because the toolkit approach will tell you 10 things to do. A toolkit is good provided you understand the context of the toolkit. In this kind of a thing, a toolkit will not help you. You need to work on yourself. Do you actually empathize with the other side or not? And when we are going to go back to the slide which we are on, which was about ourselves, we just need to do a 180 degrees and say, okay, the same thing that applies to me, can I also apply to the other side? For instance, the first one, self-awareness. Awareness of my own emotions, my own emotional state of being before I enter the negotiation, as I'm going through the negotiation. Do a 180 degrees. Am I aware of what is the possible emotional state of the person on the other side of the table? Do I have any kind of hint or inkling of that, either from the expression or the tone of the voice or the body language or something or the other person is saying or revealing? Self-awareness and the awareness about the other person. Second, self-regulation. Am I able to regulate? Regulate doesn't mean stop and control completely. Regulate means within certain conditions to know when I can express and when I cannot and to what extent. Similarly, is the other person being able to regulate their emotions or their emotions coming into play without regulation because there are intense emotions at play? We had a conversation with Himangi yesterday about her client, about her property and adverse possession and so on and so forth. Now, you just might find that emotions are very strong at play there. The other person's emotions might be very, very strong. Now, it doesn't help for us to say that, why don't you regulate it? It is not going to necessarily work in that way. But if we understand what are the triggers for it, we probably might be able to do a bit better. And we'd have to see more of that as we go along. I see some chat notings. I'm not going to comment and respond to it right away. I'm going to go ahead with the slides now. Yukta, can you get us back onto the slides? And we had the slide on the different elements of emotional intelligence, with the first bullet point being self-awareness, the second bullet point being self-regulation. Those are the two things we were talking about just a moment before this. And we broke out of that slide on bullet point 4, which was about empathy. And the last one, as the sharing process is going on, the last one was about social skills. As we open this up, again, think intuitively, what do you understand by social skills? Sometimes people say, okay, do you have abundant social skills? Or is this person lacking in social skills? What does it mean to have social skills? Is this something that you have naturally, or is it something that you can acquire through training and so on and so forth? How important it is in different domains of work? How important is it in the specific context of negotiations, which is our topic of the day? Yukta, are you being able to open this up? If not, just... Okay, I don't know whether you can all hear me or not. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay.
We can.
Okay, I thought it was hanging. You're having a problem in sharing the slide, is it?
Yeah, I'll just do it. So just give me a minute.
Yeah. So let me, in fact, just keep speaking and let me pull out my version of the slide from here and keep running with this session. If I can, actually, I'd prefer you to bring it up because we have a couple of minutes to talk about social skills. What about social skills, ladies and gentlemen? What is your sense of social skills? What are social skills? And Very importantly, think about it yourself. I'm not going to ask you necessarily. How do you rate yourself in terms of social skills based on whatever is your understanding of the term social skills as of now? Can you
So
hear
is
me?
it a,
Yeah.
Yes, Imangi.
so is it our behavior with the other peoples or our colleagues or neighbors with respect to any particular situation, how we behave with them, how we tackle them?
Yeah, it is. Yes, it is. Answer is yes. But the way I see it, I haven't gone into the concepts. My ability to be a member of a society, one. Second, how do I engage with other people? And my ability to engage with one or more persons, right? And therefore be social in a certain sense. That is, be beyond myself. So the first act of socialization, as they say, with children, how does it happen? A child learns to think beyond, their own self, and their own is all mixed up with their mother and so on. And slowly they, begin to deal with the family and then the school and so on, right? So later on in also life, how do you deal with the others? Not only deal, how do you actually interact with them? And it is not only how we behave, it is also how I think it is also in terms of specific things that we do, like not proactive behavior, but for instance, how do we make sense of the behavior of other people? I think that's also very important. And how do we also engage with them in terms of specific actions? Also, the willingness to engage with them in terms of talking to people or spending time with people or sharing our lives with their people and so on and so forth. Being genuinely interested in other people. Then I think there'll be the element of whether you're comfortable with one person. Some people are comfortable with one person, being very social with one person, or maybe with two persons. But they're not so comfortable when the number is 10 or 15 or 20. Others are very comfortable with dealing with a large number of people. It's more impersonal. But when you are dealing with one or two people, it is more individual, more personal. They find that perhaps sometimes too intrusive. So there are multiple layers to this, Amangi. The question is, when you're getting into negotiation, uh, for our purposes, what are the social skills required? And I don't believe that the only skill important here is the ability to talk. I think a very strong argument would be the ability to listen perhaps would be even more important, the ability to speak. But of course, to articulate and express what you need is an important thing. So there are multiple sort of ways of thinking about social skills. A lot of chats coming in. Let's go forward to the next slide, and then I'm going to look at the chats also. Himangi, not Himangi, sorry. Yukta, can you go on to the next slide, please? Yeah. So the emotional, is this the next one? Emotional intelligence group, just check. And let us run, just hold on to the last one so that we have continuity. We are coming back to it after a couple of minutes so people have a chance to see it. Let's go back one slide. Look at the one on self-awareness. So emotional intelligence, ladies and gentlemen, is about self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skill. And we're going forward with this conversation now to the next slide, which says what? Emotional intelligence of groups. So it adjusts the emotional intelligence of individuals, which is what we have spoken till now. There's also the emotional intelligence of groups. So it is not only important to talk about the task at hand, what is the job to be done, but it is also important to talk about the emotional state of being or the emotional intelligence of the group. Some teams, as it were, as a team or as a group, they have the ability to understand other people far more. They're more self-aware. And sometimes that is the root of their greater or better performance. Other groups of people may actually display the ability to do a task at a technical level in terms of looking at the financial numbers or the technical drawings or the formulae or the software or use of AI or whatever you're talking about, all very well. But when it comes to people, the human factor, they either are not able to do it or don't think it's important. You might find some members of the group saying, that's not important at all. What has this got to do with it? That's all, wishy-washy, abstract stuff. That's got nothing to do with it. Let's just go ahead and decide on what we have to do and finish it off. Now, it's important to understand what kind of a group you're a member of and whether for the negotiation that you are going through, this is an important thing to think about. So on the surface, in Hemangi's example, it is a matter of, which is pretty much a matter of law. You tell the person, adverse possession doctrine is going to work against you. You don't have much of a chance on this. Why don't you take some money and just close it? And this person doesn't do it. And there's the other person on the other side. Property dispute of one kind or the other. Let's get on with it. But if you were to look at it differently, you might find actually here there is a lot of other stuff, and that other stuff is that human factor. And unless you take that into account, you may not be able to make much headway. Right. So let's go on to the next slide. Emotional intelligence, ladies and gentlemen, is also fundamentally about trust. Both ways. If I'm to trust you, I need to become a bit more aware of your perspective, put myself in your shoes, see the world from you, and also open myself up to trust you. There's research to show also that what happens when people trust each other in a negotiation and what happens when people don't trust each other. From the tone of my voice and the sequence of the slides, you would expect what? Let's pull out of the slide now, Yukta, and talk to people on trust for a minute before we come to group identity and group efficacy. What is your expectation? If the negotiators trust each other, the outcomes in the negotiation would be better or worse compared to if they do not trust each other. What is the expectation?
I think, sir, if they trust on each other, the negotiation results will be not optimized to that extent if they do not trust on each other.
What about the others? Okay, Vijayant, I'm not going to give the game away by telling you whether you're on the right lines or not yet, Vijayant. Let's take the other responses. What about the others? What do you think? Trust will improve the outcomes or not trust? Should you trust?
Sir,
Somebody in my offline class used the word skepticism. Remember that skepticism? My friend who used the fantastic word skepticism, I don't know whether he is here in the online session or not. Otherwise, you can tell him that he's becoming a mini celebrity because of his use of the word skepticism. Should you trust or should you be skeptical? Which would improve the outcomes? Yes, Venkat. Venkat, can I call you Venkat? Would that be all right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's
okay.
Fine.
I'm just trying to optimize on time. I don't know what your friends and your colleagues do. Do they call you Venkat? Often, there are many Venkats around, so I'm taking the liberty of calling you Venkat. But I'm happy to call you Venkatakrishnan also, or KS, whatever you like.
Sure,
go ahead. Please go ahead and tell me what you have in mind.
So, see, what I understand by the moment you enter into a negotiation or when your trust comes in, is you negotiate when you have a trust. Am I right saying that?
Let me put it this way. You can negotiate without trust also. And there are multiple negotiations because it is not also a binary, black and white, that either you trust or you don't trust. In the real world, it'll be a continuum. There'll be multiple degrees of trust. Or you could be trusting somebody on some point and not trusting somebody on the other point. Or you might begin by trusting, but at a certain point, somebody makes a claim or makes a promise. That you find is something not something which you can trust right away. Or your experience cautions you to say, no, I should not be just putting this on trust. Promise about what might happen if you pay me the money in 2 years' time. You might want to put in a condition that, yes, I will need some proof of the servicing of that particular clause or that condition before I make you the payment, some kind of proof, right? So your trust is not necessarily just a black and white thing, that either I trust you completely or I don't trust you at all. But broadly, some people in a negotiation would be trusting. Your point that if I'm to engage in a negotiation and from the point of view of doing group decision making, as we've been talking about, we're increasing the size of the pie, as we said, in a win-win situation, when we need to think of more options, then yes, I do need to display empathy for the other side, I do need to find the capacity to trust, and I need to think that what will I do? Do I go with the paradigm that I will trust you till proven otherwise? Or do I go with the paradigm that I will not trust you till you prove me otherwise? When I was in my teens, I once told my mother that when I meet somebody, I should probably be careful and not begin by trusting. Because if I begin by trusting and the person is not worthy of my trust, then I'll have nothing to fall back on. I'd rather begin by not trusting and slowly develop the trust, because then I have less to lose. Today, when I look back on life, I thought there was the germ of cynicism in that. Because as a young person, fortunately, I did not lead my life that way. In your teens, you have various thoughts which come in. I think it is also good to lead life on the basis of some amount of trust. Otherwise, we are not good human beings. Having said that, let me now report back to you the results of the research on this. Vijay, and it so happens that you're on the right lines. Some of the research shows that actually the outcomes of people who do not trust in a negotiation are better than the people who completely trust and are not skeptical and do not look carefully at the various claims or promises being made. Now, research, as you know, is an ongoing process. There are projects and projects and projects. So it is not necessary that all the research has got a settled view. But some of the research, and this is very good, rigorous research, seems to report what you're saying, Vijay. Okay. So this is on trust. I think we can just go back now to the slide again. Can we go back to the slide? Yukta, can we go back to the slide, please? I think that's taking a bit of time. That's taking a bit of time. So we were talking about the difference between what happens at the individual level and the group level. One of the questions is, for you, again, all of you, individually, it is all very well to talk about self-awareness and self-regulation. But when I'm part of a group, as we are part of a group in a breakout room yesterday, perhaps today again, perhaps in your last session as well, how do you judge whether this group is self-aware, whether this group is high or low on emotional intelligence, whether this group is ready to look at the world from the point of view of the other side, forget their capacity and the skill to do that, whether this group actually has necessary social skills or is low on that? How do you do that? In other words, how do you actually begin to think of the group identity? Is this a group whose essential identity is technical? Is it a group whose identity they're very proud of? They're very identity proud of themselves as experts, and the big egos at play? Is it a group which is a high performance group? And their self-perception is also that we are brilliant people. We know this. Is it a group whose self-identity, part of that is about lack of a confidence? Is it a group which has got a certain kind of a legacy guilt that they know inside of them that they have not been good to the other side? Is it a group that is low in terms of performance and is not efficient that you can make out group efficacy? Is it a group that has got a lot of internal conflict and therefore the efficacy of the group's functioning in any meeting is not very high? People are contradicting each other and working at cross purposes when they go into negotiations. You know this because you have been part of many negotiations with other parties with this group. How do you understand all of these things and what can you do about that? Similarly, let's assume the 180 degrees view now. You are putting the lens on the other group. Your group, you're very sure about, you've worked with them. It is got a very clear and good identity, very confident, not arrogant, extremely knowledgeable, ethical, no legacy guilt, believes in doing the right things, extremely efficient, and so on. The perfect group you're a member of. And you're a perfect person, let's assume. But what about the other side? Supposing you identify these problems on the other side. You find that they are not high performing. They seem to be talking at cross purposes. They seem to be displaying a lot of ego, and so on and so forth. How do you deal with them? Would you be trusting them? And how do you understand this? Do you understand this? Do you think about this? Those are the things to also think about. In other words, emotional intelligence, not only at the individual level, where it is only one person vis-a-vis the other person, but it is also when there are more than one person involved in the negotiations or conversation. Next slide, please, Yukta. Therefore, what is emotional leadership? Leadership has multiple components. A lot of this conversation about emotional intelligence is actually in the context of leadership nowadays. You know, leadership is a term which people like to use much more now, I would think, in many more contexts than people used to do it a couple of decades back. Earlier, in the context of management, you could be a managing director or a chairman. People would not necessarily refer to you as a leader. A leader would be the leader of a country, perhaps. But nowadays, leadership could be even the leader of a team. So there is leadership and a leader. So you could be engaging in a leadership activity or function, even if you don't have a job title which calls you the chief of something or the head of something or the director of something. Now, if you're somebody who believes that you have leadership qualities in you, if you believe that there's leadership required even during a negotiation, then one component of that would be also emotional leadership. That is the ability to understand your own impact on others within your team on this side of the table, which is your side of the table, of the negotiating table, and your impact as an individual and your team's impact on the other side of the table. That is also about leadership. You might find that you're in a negotiation where clearly you and your colleagues are far more knowledgeable, representing a far larger organization than the vendor organization, for instance, with far more experience and power. But your experience tells you that you don't want to close this by showing power and making them feel bullied. That would be leadership. They might be inexperienced, a bunch of young people with less experience, not so powerful, ready to do business with you, but very inexperienced and new. They may actually be having cash flow problems. You don't want them to be in trouble. Your leadership would be also maybe pointing out some problems from their point of view, which they're not taking into account. That would be leadership and group decision making, and working out options which takes care of your interests as a larger organization, as a body of experts, and that small, young, new, weaker in terms of power organization. If you do that, they will grow with you, and in 10 years, they'll remember you. That would be the leadership, to understand their worries, their concerns, where they're coming from. So it's understanding your leadership. And how do you adjust your style? How do you adjust your style? Let's break out of this slide again and talk to people on the word style and introduce the word communication style. What is the style? Is not a question of which shirt I wear, whether I wear a tie or not. It has got nothing to do with the accent or the diction that I have or whichever language I'm speaking. It is to do with two principal things essentially. That's just communication, and in this context whether we are talking about. It's about whether you want to be communicating in a guru mode. Even if you're in today's world, even if you're doing an act which is that of a professor, the guru mode is that of the old school headmaster, that I know everything, you know nothing, and I have nothing to learn from you, you have everything to learn from me. That's not the only mode or the ideal mode. And then the other mode is a participatory mode, a consultative mode, that I also talk to you. However, the style issue is this. There's a trade-off if you do a graph from your point of view. Vertical axis, horizontal axis. When I'm presenting or talking to somebody, if I want to be in control of the content at hand, I cannot make it too participatory, both for the point of view of time management and otherwise. If I want to do brainstorming and engage in a creative process of thinking of more ideas, then I can make it more participatory and more consultative. So when I'm looking at this in a negotiation situation of the kind that I'm talking about, where I am part of a larger organization which has more power, I am definitely an expert in my domain. Everybody knows that, me and my team. In our example, the other side is young, inexperienced, definitely not experts, having specific business problems like cash flow and so on and so forth. Ambitious, sincere, wanting to do business with you. And I'm trying to find solutions which are good for both. What should be my style? How should I adjust my style? How do I admit their opinions? How do I make them feel more at ease? How do I point out technicals to them without being overbearing? How do I do all of these? From the way in which I sit, if I've been in very senior positions, sometimes the tone of my voice, my manner would carry that. I need to be very conscious and try very hard, and I still may not be successful in seeming like a friend to them. At the same time, I need to hold on to my position. How do I do that? And how much time do I have to work on this? Are they important enough? Now, all of these would actually become important as you go along in certain kinds of negotiations, because it may be that while they're the smaller player, you're the bigger one. Over time, you see something in them which will be strategically advantageous for you. You might notice something in them that would be good for you to have. And that's why it may be worth your while to invest your time and energy. In another situation, it may not be. It's not your job to train everybody else always in life and become a leader in those terms. But emotional leadership would be to understand the emotions of yourself, your team, as well as the others, and your impact on all of them. Let's go back to the slide. We're pretty much finishing up on this section. We should be finishing on slide number 32. You can see which slide number we are. If we have not too many left, one more, we'll just finish it off and then go for it. Yukta, please, let's go back to the slide.
Yes, sir.
Emotional agility, that's an important one. Leaders stumble because they get hooked to undesirable thoughts and feelings. They buy into or try to suppress their inner experiences. Okay, now this is important. We were speaking in the beginning of this session, in the early part of the session rather, before I brought up the slides, about what is your understanding of emotional intelligence. And you'd recall, some of you, in today's session, the first three gentlemen expressed a view which essentially was that we should be in better control of our emotions. And if we are able to keep control of them and keep the job of negotiation aside, then we do a better job of negotiations. The question is for us to look at this slide and link it up to those thoughts. And I'd also put in other thoughts with that. Is that always the best thing to do, and so on and so forth. Now, sometimes leaders are hooked in the sense of connected very strongly to certain thoughts and feelings in their own head. And they're hooked to it. They cannot dislodge it. They cannot get rid of it. And because they're such ingrained thoughts, they sometimes lose out and they stumble and fall. For instance, there could be a certain kind of leaders who would say, on financial matters, we cannot look at anything else. It's got to be hard finance. Or on engineering details, we are going to just look at engineering details, specifics of the engineering problem at hand and nothing else, and so on and so forth. Or I need to, on every deal, make so much, or my margin here is non-negotiable. In other words, a statement of positions rather than interests. They're hooked on to, just like they're hooked on to certain positions, they're sometimes hooked on to certain undesirable thoughts and feelings. I touch base with my own thoughts and feelings to do with my ego, my sense of power, my sense of sometimes what I believe is right and wrong. And sometimes you find they are buying into or actually holding on to those thoughts, those inner experiences a bit too much. Or the reverse, they're trying to suppress. This is slide number, can you just check? I cannot read it. Is this slide number 32? or 31? Just go ahead. Just see whether it's the last slide. Because if it's the last slide, if it's not, I'm going to the last slide and then we're going to break out of this. Okay. We are on emotional. Now, okay,
So
we
we are
broke
at
it.
slide number 26.
Okay, so we are going to break right after this. We are not going to go to 30. We're going to come back. All right. So I'm going to ask you this: that leaders who are hooked into certain kinds of experiences and thoughts. No, forget about the slides. We don't need the slides. Let's stop sharing. We're going to go for a break now. I would like you to think as you go into the break now as to what is your own experience of being in negotiations. Did you find ever people who seem to be somehow absolutely hooked into, caught in a certain kind of a thought or certain sentiment or certain belief, which is almost being rigid, right? I've, for instance, conversations at home about what your conversations about children and children's education. Now, there are certain kind of things that we believe are the right thing. Right? If you think about it, it is our belief that is the right thing, which is a debatable belief. And sometimes we take away years of childhood on that belief without necessarily questioning it. Because we believe that studying for 3 hours in the evening is a good thing to do. Or somebody might believe that if you're not good in maths, you don't have a future. Or somebody believes that in order to do well in today's world, you got to speak a particular language in a particular way. And so on and so forth. So what are those beliefs? And the agility is in, do you have the flexibility? Just like the flexibility in having more options. As a person, do you have the flexibility to question your own ingrained beliefs and experiences? And actually relax what you believe is your firm belief. And say, yes, I believe this is a good thing. However, I'm ready to listen to you and hear the opposite point of view. Maybe the other views. Leaders need to also have some flexibility. I'm going to break in with this story in 30 seconds or a minute, and that'll take us into the break. This is the story from a book which is not about persuasion. It's about being persuaded. How persuadable are people? Some people are not persuadable. That's what the book says. In other words, they don't have the ability to be persuaded by anything because they're so rigid in their beliefs compared to other people who are, and some of the leaders are. The story is about the US war in Afghanistan. And also just before the operation to kill one of the terrorists there, Osama bin Laden. There's a meeting at the White House of the top general, 4-star general, who has made all preparations. Everybody sitting in the room is a bit in awe of him because of his experience and credentials. He's the expert, and others are listening in. And he's presented a plan. And slowly the other people, when they ask for comments, they begin to make the comments. What does the general do? He has the expertise and the authority to make everybody quiet and say, no, you don't know this and I know it. However, he does something else. He begins to write down each of the criticisms and the comments and begins to respond to them and says, okay, I'm going to go back to the drawing board and see what your comments mean. He takes all of that and he actually revises his plan wherever he thinks is necessary. Of course, doesn't revise where he's not convinced, and goes back with a plan adjusting for all the comments and feedback which is coming in, and then launches the operation. This is an example of a gentleman who is persuadable, and he's clearly a leader. So when you are wanting to be a leader, or you are in a position that you're required to display leadership, it's important to have that agility, emotional agility, as part of your emotional leadership. And that's an act of flexibility. Okay, so this is where we finish off this part of the session. It is 12:15, about 12:30. Let's come back at 12:30. Okay, so what we have done is we have worked from 10:30 to 12:15, 15 minutes more now. When we come back, we need to finish the session at 2 o'clock, Yukta? Or 1:30? 1:30, right? 3 hours, 1:30. So we'll go for 1 hour, and we'll be done at 1:30 or so. Is that all right as a plan? Because it's Sunday, I'm asking you.
Yeah.
Should we take the break now?
Yes,
Or
sir.
what about the rest of you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Should we
Yes,
come back
sir.
at 12:30? Three options. Should we come back at 12:30? Should we come back at 1? Should we come back at 1:30 and declare it closed?
12:30.
All right. So we'll come back at 12:30. Thank you so much. See you at 12:30.
Yes.
Bye. Can you hear me on? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So time to
Yes,
begin.
sir.
Okay, good. So we'll carry forward the conversation. We're talking about emotional leadership. And within that emotional leadership, that whole idea of emotional leadership, the importance of flexibility and the importance of agility. Agility in the specific sense of you're having the capacity to adjust your style and your thinking based on your understanding of the emotional state of other team members, your own team, individually as a group, as well as people on the other side, individually or as a group. Are you able to adjust for that? We gave the example before we went into the break of a situation where you're representing a larger organization, you're a team of experts with far greater power and also credibility in the field. Compared to the other side, which is a small startup, perhaps a vendor, young, with having some genuine business problems like cash flow, ambitious, sincere, and you do see there's some potential benefit in engaging with them in a long-term sense because they have some advantages. Maybe they're very talented. Maybe they're new, but you can see they're very talented. Excuse me, having some cashews. I didn't have a very heavy breakfast to keep my energy levels going. And you can do that too on a Sunday morning, whatever you like, your coffee and tea. Now, the other example which I'm going to give you is a bit different, just the reverse. You find that you're on the side of an organization you've set up. You're not sitting with a lot of funds. You want to do a sincere job, a good job. You have knowledge. You're perhaps 2 years into your own practice like Siddharth Rao in Hyderabad. That's what I gather in my conversation from him the other day. And suddenly you find on the other side, there's an organization who are trying to bully you. They've got a lot of power. They're sitting with some ideas which are old world ideas, not necessarily have kept up with the times, but they have a lot of legacy pride. But they have got market power. Even in their body language, tone of voice, they're trying to clearly bully you. Also with veiled threats, using the concept of perhaps BATNA without using the term battle. Telling you that I'm going to get you out of the market. I've got many other options other than you. You should consider it a privilege. Your good luck that you're getting a chance to work with. So basically, the idea that, how dare you even talk about price? That the fact that we've allowed you into the office, that's your good luck. That's the kind of attitude. Then what should you do? How would you show your adaptability? What would you do? Not an easy one. You do want the contract. You don't want to be bullied. You don't want a tutu meme, but you're becoming equally aggressive. At the same time, you have to find a way of holding your own and not get bullied. Because you do realize the gaps in the other side, the deficiencies in the other side. One, they don't have expertise, which is contemporary. They need you. They have not kept up with the times and done their homework. They don't know the market as it exists, as it's evolving. The situation for many businesses today in the world of digital transformation, whole professions and industries are getting turned upside down. The one that I've worked in for many years, media and entertainment and communication and telecommunication, the one that some of you are coming in from, the world of business and finance. Tremendous things happening there. And again, with AI, again, another round of it. Huge regulatory complications, huge opportunities also. Now, this party on the other side, they don't know any of this. They need you. You understand this. You're dealing with people who have got huge egos. At the same time, they do have a presence in the market in terms of a strong brand name, and they're sitting on a pile of money, maybe for no good reason except for legacy. So they have clearly market power. They can make things difficult for you. How would you adjust your style? What would you do during the negotiation? What would you recognize as your own positive and negative and their positive and negative, and what would you do? I don't have a simple and answer like a quiz show, but it is again a situation for you to think about. Each person would deal with it differently. Somebody will take the stand that they don't know that I don't have a battle. They believe that I don't. Do I need to behave as if I don't have an alternative? Do I need to take this bullying? Perhaps not. Maybe if I've done my homework right, I might find that they have a need for my services far more than I have for them. Yes, I do need business, but they have an equal or greater need. Because in this domain here, for the price at which I'm offering, there's nobody else in the market. I'm very sure about it. I've done my homework. Then how do I politely hold my own? Compare that with a situation where I do know that if I don't have this contract, my funding is running out. My team members are saying that, no, we can't go with this startup anymore. If I don't get this, I'm pretty much going to be closing shop. What do I do? Do I take the bullying? If it's only a verbal bullying and a matter of body language, that's one thing. But in my terms and conditions, do I take it? What do I do? Now, these are situations and examples where this human element that we are talking about gets mixed up in what we are talking about in a way that affects the negotiation. And that brings up this whole notion of integrated or integrative emotions compared to incidental emotions. You won't see it on the slide. Integrated emotions are the emotions which are generated as part of the negotiation. Incidental emotions are because of some factor outside of it. Somebody coming in to a negotiation, they've had a bad argument with their spouse, or they've received a sad news about a close friend having passed away. That's an incidental emotion, but it could affect the negotiation. And integrated emotion is integrated within the negotiation. Something during the negotiation or something about the negotiation is proving to be an emotional trigger to make somebody angry or upset or a bit irritated or a bit disappointed or a bit frustrated or happy and satisfied and cooperative. You need to recognize both of them in your emotional leadership or in your emotional intelligence and act upon it. Okay, so this is some of the quick remarks in terms of examples. You can think about it. Let's see whether we can do a bit of an exercise. We have time to do it. Let's see. I can't promise given today's time, but we might be able to do a short breakout activity. You have to be ready for it. We don't need to necessarily have the same kind of configuration of breakout rooms as yesterday. You might not have maintained a record, or it might be difficult to set it up that way. I'm fine with either of them. Okay, so we might do that somewhere around at about 1 o'clock. Now it is about 1:15. Let's go ahead with the slide. We were on slide 26, running ahead with that. This set of slides finishes at 32. We should be able to finish it within the next 15 minutes. Before I go back to it, actually, I should ask you to come back from the break. Does anybody have a comment, a quick comment or a quick question? Nobody has, so let's go back to this slide.
So one small question, sir.
Yeah, Vijay, go ahead.
Yeah, so just can you, sir, explain this agility? So the term agility means exactly.
Yeah, just hold on to this. Hold on to this, Yukta. She's spoken of agility. We are on agility. Leaders stumble because they get hooked to undesirable thoughts and feelings, or they buy into or try to suppress their inexperience. Agility, Vijay, is our ability to loosen that hook. We're in some kind of a trap that we have created in our own mind. We might think that if A, B, and C happens, then necessarily D will follow. And D we see as a failure, or as a letdown in our face, as a face-off. This could be to do with financials in terms of concepts that we know, all of us know, whether it could be in terms of revenue targets, profits, whatever it may be, or margins or whatever, right? Or it could be in terms of something else. Okay, it could be in terms of project deliverables, you're in project management, in terms of time. Anytime, even if I go wrong on a project by 2 days, you see this as a personal letdown. You'll compromise in anything but not on time. But in certain kinds of things, for instance, research, the time frame is not that important. If you go wrong, I was told this by my professor years back in Massachusetts. I kept on being very deadline focused, very much focused on meeting my time frame. And he used to try and impress upon me that when you're doing research and some activities, intellectual activities or creative activities, then it is okay to take 6 months more and do a project, do something which is of a higher quality, which is of lasting value. In other words, I needed to unhook myself from the idea that time is the most important factor in that context. This is an example of how you need to have self-awareness about some of your own ideas and the thoughts and feelings it provokes, and review them, relook them, and release yourself from the rigidity of them. Become flexible about it. Agility, read as flexibility about them. Being agile as in move from one position to an alternative position. Bullet point 2 is very important, the second part. Sometimes we are buying into certain ideas, but those ideas are perhaps legacy ideas. For instance, I believe that children should always express respect for their parents in particular terms. Okay? That might be something that I've learned from my parents or grandparents. Don't raise your voice, stand up in front of elders. Salman Khan says, for a recent project that they did, on stage he was standing throughout for 1 hour when his father was sitting, and they asked him why. And he said because he had grown up going to stand up in front of his father always. And that's what he continues to do till today. Okay. On the same stage, there was another gentleman equally successful who sat next to his father because his father, Javed Akhtar, told him that you carry on the legacy that I have in my family with a smile of never listening to your father. Both Salim and Javed used to work together and were a screenwriting duo, very famous in the 70s. Everybody knew them as Salim Javed, and they made a small documentary series on that. That was the context. The question is, sometimes we buy into some legacy ideas. Is it good, or should we try to release ourselves from that, Vijay? And should we have the agility to move away from that? Sometimes, and that's the second part of bullet point 2, sometimes you have to ask the reverse question. If you have certain experiences and you have certain thoughts and feelings, is it a good idea to suppress them always? Whether it is frustration or anger or irritation or displeasure. And by suppressing them, are you going to have an honest relationship? Even in a negotiation, if it is happening over time, over a couple of months or years, or if it's a long-standing relationship, it is a relationship with the other business partner. Can you build that on the basis of transparency, or can you build it on the basis of hide and seek? Do you need to be honest to yourself in order to? Those are questions for each person to think about and answer, because as it says, this is about your inner experiences. How do you deal with your inner experiences? What is the best thing for you? If you suppress and you're somebody who can adjust with it and you're all right with it, and you can put it into a bucket or a little box somewhere and forget about it later, that's all right. But if it's going to bother you forever, it's possibly better for you not to suppress it. You got to deal with it depending on who you are and how you respond to it as well. But all of that is in the paradigm of emotional agility, your flexibility with your own emotions, not being caught up in one emotional state, not being a binary that either I'm this or I'm nothing. Okay. Does that respond to your question reasonably, Vijayant?
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, if you have any, want to talk further, all of you for this or anyone, I'll be happy to talk to you. Next slide, please, Yukta. Emotional agility, therefore, involves what? Mindfulness, what we were talking about just a second ago, is to understand yourself, but connected with what we spoke about 1 minute before, is what we're going to talk about now. The first one is something that we hear about a lot nowadays: mindfulness. You have many, many people talking about it, but the way I understand it is very simple. I exist in the moment and I'm fully present in that moment, just like a small child is. Children don't spend a lot of time thinking about the past. They don't spend a lot of time and effort thinking about the future, but they are fully present, living their life in the moment. Part of being mindful is also being mindful of your environment and everybody else who's present there. If I'm fully aware of what is happening in the moment, I'll be less inhibited, caught up in, hooked into the legacy. I'll be less caught up in what else might have influenced my ideas and thoughts and feelings. I'll be present there, and I'll be able to sometimes also make adjustments which are demanded by the situation or the environment or the person that I'm with in that moment. At 12:50, 25th of August, 2024. All of us, are we fully in now at the moment? Are we thinking of nothing else? Everything that we are doing, is it not influenced by anything else? Are we mindful? If I am mindful, I'll have greater ability to be agile and flexible about my own emotions and my responses to the emotions of the others as I read it. That's also very important. Emotional intelligence involves not only me, but it also involves the others that I'm with, whether those others are part of my team or there are others sitting on the opposite side of the negotiating table. Second, emotional agility also involves having a good understanding of the values that I'm driven by. Now, those values I can think about deeply, but sometimes behavior and legacy and culture are linked up with values, and that's some of the ways in which culture is also defined. Another example, again from the world of films, about again a father and son story, father and children. This is about the late Rishi Kapoor, the actor, Raj Kapoor's son. His wife and his son Ranbir Kapoor and Neetu Singh ji, they both seem to say that Rishi Kapoor had ideas about the father-son relationship, about the respect, which in a way kept him at a distance from his children, because he was very much, very, almost rigid about the idea of respect and children needing to show respect in certain ways to him. And in a certain way, his wife and something that created a distance between him and his son and daughter, and he lost out something in that. This is not something that I'm imagining or interpreting. These are from statements in the public domain that his son and his wife have made. And they love him a lot. They respect him a lot. They were just talking about the kind of values that he had grown up with. And he believed that those are the values to also determine the kind of relationship that he would have with his children. Very different from my father and my grandfather. My grandfather in his time was pretty much the kind of person who would expect the respect to be also in certain very specific behavioral terms. How do you speak to your father, whether you knock the door and enter, whether you begin to chat up your father or not. For him, the answers would be no to a lot of them. You do not chat up with your father without having some matter necessarily on hand. You show respect by listening to your father almost always, and so on and so forth. My father was very clear that he wanted to move away and he wanted to treat me as a friend and talk to me as a friend, with one rider though. And that rider, in a sense of values, was that you are friendly with your father, but your father is not your school friend. You don't pat your father's back, and there's a boundary that you don't cross. So if you are invested in values, ladies and gentlemen, then the emotional agility comes in understanding my emotions and to live with those emotions and express them where they are linked to my essential values and what I believe in. So I would be value focused. I can change my emotional response and work towards that, but I will not necessarily compromise on the values I believe in. For instance, in a negotiation, if I believe in integrity, if I believe in integrity, Mr. Bhatnagar, I'm just going to respond to your chat question in a bit. If I believe in integrity, then I do not compromise on that. However, my responses in terms of your emotions and my own emotions, that I could work on and review if you want. But if I believe that something is values, based on my values, then I will not compromise on that. So I need to understand also what values drive me. I also need to essentially think of my values in the larger sense, professional values and personal values, and use it as a basis for my actions, but recognize my emotions which surround it and my own self as a person, which is going to really be implementing all of that. So I need to be aware of that. This is where I would again break out of the slide for a bit with a request to Yukta to tell me the slide number before I respond to the question in the chat box at this moment, which is coming up. Yukta, can we just move it out? Let me look at the chat box and see whether I can see the question. Give me a second, please. Mr. Bhatnagar, would you like to come in with your question and share it with us? I'm trying to open up the chat just a moment. Yeah, Mr. Anil Bhatnagar is saying on the chat for everybody to see whether the past experiences have a say in our emotional intelligence. Yeah, I do believe that our emotions, I'm not an expert on this question, I must admit that. But I do believe that our emotions are not like something which is static, that it never changes. Because our emotions are also something which I believe are dynamic, and they develop and change based on our experiences and our responses. So to answer your question, I would think, Mr. Bhatnagar, that our experiences do determine how we, if not create the emotions, how we express them or how we regulate them. Right? For instance, if a person has gone through a very difficult time many times in life, that would make that person resilient. But maybe whenever a similar situation comes up, and earlier the outcomes have been negative, that might again bring up the apprehension that things will go wrong. That might create anxiety. That might create feelings of frustration. If I've gone through something which has got a personal resonance, it might actually create a trigger for me whenever a similar situation comes up. I had somebody in my family, it's painful for me to talk about it, one of my cousins, who actually, as a child, had a fall and he hurt his head in the wrong way. And that created a serious problem and he passed away early. He did not have a normal life because of that injury. He was a bright child. So when I begin to think of such situations about the schooling and education of my own child, sometimes I do understand I'm being overprotective, even in my conversations with the school, about, for instance, children climbing on stairs, because I know that that fall from the stairs changed the life of somebody who was very dear to me. So my emotional response in terms of the anxiety that it potentially creates and what I do is obviously not independent of the life that I've lived. So I would agree with you. I think you did say that, I think you said it in a question, does it? You did not state that it is so. I would say it's in the affirmative, but I'm sure that there will be research to also indicate what other people have thought and said. At the moment, I'm not able to share with it because I've not checked this out. But it's something good to check out on. I believe legacy and past experiences, both formally at a conceptual level and empirically, would have a bearing on your current emotional state. Okay. Let's go on to the next slide, Yukta. I think there's a question from Venkat. Let's take the question and come back to the slide. You can stop the share. There's a question coming in from Vijay, not that. Yeah. The question was from Venkat or Vijay? I think somebody raised their hands as we are exiting the screen and getting onto the slide. Or did I?
No question, sir. No question, sir.
I thought I might have imagined it.
No, just I raised my hand like this.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so let's go back to the slide, Yukta. Sorry. We go to the slide just before that for continuity. We know where we are coming from. We were talking about emotional agility before that, about emotional leadership. And now we are getting into what we do about that. So let's go on to the next slide. Emotional intelligence, we're connecting to those initial thoughts about what is emotional intelligence. It's about, one, recognizing your own patterns. in terms of your patterns of experiencing the emotion and your behavior based on that, whether it's anger or fear or anxiety and all the rest of our emotions. One of the things that you can do is to understand what those emotions are and in your mind label it. They call it labeling it. So whenever I hear a certain kind of a trigger, I can see that I know that usually in that situation, I would react in that way. So we had examples of fathers and the children and the whole notion of respect. So the fathers could think and the children could think that okay, whenever this situation arrives, the father would begin to respond in this way. If I behave in this way, the father would see that as disrespect. And it is good for the father, perhaps, if they want to work on it, as well as the children, to recognize that, this is a situation. I'm standing or sitting on the chair. I, as a father, would interpret this as a lack of respect if my son sits down. If I'm a son, I would think that if I do not stand up, my father would think I'm not respecting. Once I label it, I know what to do about it. If both of us agree in a conversation when this is not happening, that this is something that we would like to change, at the same time this keeps on happening, we'd both say, okay, we label it. Whenever this happens, I will tell myself, if I'm a father, my son is not standing because it's a long period of time and I'm getting on in years and becoming older. My son is also getting on in years and getting older. And my son, would find it difficult to stand for so long because my son already has a knee problem. It has got nothing to do with his respect for me. It's all right if he sits. And the son would say that, okay, 60 years of my life, I've stood up whenever my father has been there, but I've got a knee problem now. I've explained it to my father. It is okay for me to sit down, and my father knows and will know that I still respect him as I've always had, even if I'm sitting down. I'm labeling the trigger. I'm labeling what kind of thoughts will come into my mind at the moment it begins to come. And I know whenever I have that label in front of me, I know how I should be responding and try to do it. If I don't achieve that change now, I will hopefully at a certain point of time. That's the idea of labeling. I need to accept my emotions. I think it's very important, and I've always believed that I need to accept myself as a human being with all my deficiencies and all my flaws and all my positives and all my strengths. I was just having, in fact, a conversation with my child during the break. And I did say something to the effect that, we're not like little machines or a mobile or a laptop. We're human beings with good and bad. So this happens. It happens. It's all right. It's good to accept it. I think if we believe that we are perfect or that we want to be perfect, sometimes it's too high a bar. We don't achieve it. And in the process, we create a lot of needless frustration for ourselves. I believe that. As a student, I began to do a bit better. The day I did not give myself the target of achieving 100% in every exam I did. Till a point, I really believed that I could get 100%. Obviously, I couldn't. So I had more manageable targets by accepting in different subjects what are my relative strengths and weaknesses and what I can actually do. And I think I began to do much better. And the fourth bullet point is important: act on your values. We said that earlier on the last time. We need a certain kind of an anchor as we move, I believe. What is that going to be that anchor? A great German philosopher said the only thing that stays are your values. Everything else is transient. If you know the values that you stand by, whether those are personal or professional values, whether those values are derived from your family or your organization or your readings or your own thoughts, and you continue to act on those values with sincerity and integrity, you have a basis for everything, including the emotions that you allow yourself to have and the emotions that you will not allow yourself to have. So you must be, if you have a value system and values as your anchor, that's a great guidepost for everything, including emotions and emotional intelligence. Built on that is more sustainable, I believe, than on some rough and ready idea or a toolkit, the term that we heard earlier in the session. A toolkit has got limited purpose, limited usage for me when I talk of things like emotional intelligence, because that's to do with far more deeper and complex things. Next slide, please. Yukta, next slide, please. How do I handle closed positions? If somebody is inflexible or rigid on the other side, note two words up there, closed and positions. We know the difference between positions and interests. Here, one, somebody is fixated, hooked into a particular position, and they're absolutely closed about it. They don't want to move left, right, or center, as very often it happens in positions or positional negotiations or distributive negotiations where it's a zero-sum game. This is what I want. I believe there's nothing else to talk about. Either you say yes or no. You're dealing with a rigid person and a rigid position. What do you do? Yukta, I do want to go on to the next slide at this moment. I didn't want to break out, but probably it happened without us wanting to. Can we just go back to the slide again? We want to talk a little bit about closed positions and how do we open it up. We can guess from our conversations till now that one of the ways, of course, would be to open up that position and demonstrate to the other side as well as to ourselves what are the real interests hiding behind those positions and how we can find options to meet those interests by pursuing other options and not necessarily only holding on to this particular position and being so fixated and rigid about it. Let's go on to the next slide. This is, as we're saying, opening up this closed position. First bullet point, we already said this. Second, we need to work together. And I've been saying this about group decision making. I think it's a change of mindset. When I'm sitting with one person on the other side, it's a one-on-one negotiation, or it's a team versus team negotiation. Forget the word versus. Let's begin to see this together. Let's try to build consensus. So this is in fact called a consensus building approach even in meetings. Let's work together. How do we meet the minimum concerns? That's one point of interest. How do we understand what is your most important interest in terms of your need or your want? How do I communicate to you what is my most important interest, number one interest in terms of need or want? If there is a difference between the two, we can trade your interest with mine. You can get what is most important to you. I can get what is most important to me, because as we said yesterday also, that there is a lot of scope for negotiations whenever both the sides don't consider the same thing to be of equal value. So that's what opens up the possibilities at bullet point number 2 of group decision making, where you open up more options. If you open up more options, that's increasing the options on the table. And in that sense of opening up more options on the table, you're dealing with you're having a larger cake to distribute, a larger number of options to distribute or consider, a larger number of packages to consider, and so on. The third bullet point is important, that no matter what you do at the end, when you're about to close in, we do need to check for both sides. Are your minimum concerns met? Your interests are also about the minimum, not the maximum. There's certain critical concerns that you have. Are you able to meet that? If you are not able to meet that, the rest will not work. And people will move out of their negotiated agreement very soon. You want your agreement to sustain. If you're in an investment situation, you're talking to a bunch of potential investors. What are investors really worried about most of the time? They're worried about the return on the investment. And the other very, very important thing is about the risk. Their concern would be about the risk. If you have not given adequate answers or built in adequate responses to their concern about risk, this will not run the course of time. So you must build that concern and respond to it within this agreement for the future as well. Next slide, please. We've spoken a lot about the other person's point of view in the context of emotions. At the moment, we're not talking about only emotions. The slide began by talking about closed positions. That is talking about negotiations per se, which involves everything, emotional or otherwise. So do remember when you're looking at bullet point 1, this is not only about emotional intelligence, it is also about emotional intelligence. But I need to understand, using every capacity that I have, what is the other most important concern. This first point on this bullet point links up to the last point in the previous slide, which is, what is the most important concern? Is it taken care of? Now, am I able to communicate what is the most important thing from my point of view and connect it to the most important thing from their point of view? If I can find those intersections, points of interest and concern, then I will be able to negotiate better because I have a common ground. And a common ground, if I want to show, if you like graphics, here it's a point where I could use a Venn diagram to put in that intersection that we learned in school, the Venn diagram, right? That we heard about earlier. But whether we use a Venn diagram or not, the point is an intersection of interest and concern. If we can find something which is intersecting in terms of options, then we can close the deal. It is very important for us, therefore, to show the benefits of each option, each package on the table that we can consider when you're all working together. What is benefit? The benefit can accrue in the following ways. Anything which meets our needs or our wants will be considered to be beneficial to us or to the other side. Anything which can satisfy or adequately respond to our concern, whether it's about risk in terms of physical safety or money or whatever, that would also provide a benefit to us because it is reducing our risk or our perception of risk. So in that act of communication during negotiation, I need to be focused on looking at options which can provide benefits in these terms to both the sides. Next slide, please. Yukta, the next slide, please. I think we have either lost Yukta or we've lost the slide.
Yeah,
But we
sir.
almost,
There was a network connection. I'll bring the slides back.
yeah, I don't think we have too many more. We need to run with it, and we still have 15 minutes, and let's see whether we can do something in terms of activity. So I would like to finish this in about 2 minutes. Okay, now this is a quick one. A lot of you are in domains which are broadly technical. For instance, construction or finance or even law. Now, technical means there's a technical element to law, of course. But in all of these, there's a technical side of things and there's a non-technical side of things. Sometimes the person on the other side doesn't have the technical knowledge, yet the person is a decision maker. Therefore, this is the act of communication. You need to find ways of communicating the larger story. If you get caught up in only the technical aspects of it, the other person will not understand what you're trying to communicate. So you must actually talk a language of the interests of both the sides, the concerns of both the sides, and the solutions to the concerns, and the ways in which the interests are going to be met in non-technical terms. Maybe you can touch upon it, but not go too much in detail if the person on the other side, is not from the same technical domain. Of course, if they are from the same domain, then that's all right. So at bullet point 2, you need to demonstrate the nature of the problem without jargon. In other words, this would apply everywhere. What are the effects? What is the problem? Who is affected by the problem? Why are they affected by the problem? Is it money? Is it their life? Is it their job? Like what? What are the effects that the problem is creating, right? And the causes of it. Now, if you can connect those effects to the effects as they seem to you from your side, why you're troubled by this, to the effects as it seem to the other side, and you can talk a language other than the jargon in terms of the outcomes, the problematic outcomes, what it's doing to people's lives or business, and how you can solve it, you have told them the larger story. That's why it's very important to have this word story in your mind, story in the sense of the narrative. From the 90-foot view, if I'm looking at from the top, what is this whole negotiation really about? Is it about human life? Is it about the future of business? Is it about financial, dealings? Is it about fairness and unfairness, one person being unfair to the other? What is it really about? And if I can demonstrate that and introduce those ideas and then go into the technical details, I'm usually doing a better job of communication. The next slide, please. It is important to take into account the specific context of the person that you are negotiating with in terms of their culture. Culture is not only about countries and regions of the country and language, it is also about organizations, it is also about generations, it is also about gender groups, it is also about different professions. Chartered accountants might have a different culture in terms of the work, norms, values, attitudes, acceptable behavior compared to engineers, or compared to scientists, or compared to filmmakers or actors, or compared to sports people. You need to find commonality. That's bullet point 2. Because you will not negotiate and close it unless you find commonality. You need to recognize those differences and respect that, whether it's in terms of behavior or language on both the sides. Otherwise, you will not have that rapport, that trust, that understanding. And you need to show empathy, that word that we have met before in this session, in a real sense. Not manufactured empathy because as a toolkit, but really look within yourself and try to find that space of generosity and compassion where you think about other human being as a human being. And that's the human factor. And have empathy for their position. Very difficult to do. Very often we can't and never will. But at least it's good to be aware that that is possible for some people to do. And I believe the people who do it, they're greater people and better human beings, at least in terms of that capacity. Next slide, please. I think we are over, and thank you. 32 slides over. Let's pull out of the slides now. We have 15 minutes for this session, and then we have the next session 1 week from today. How would you like to use these 15 minutes, roughly 15 minutes or 13 minutes by now? I know it is 1:17. Would you like to do a quick breakout activity? Do you think anything would come? It will be very quick, actually, just about 10 minutes. Or would you like to actually have more of a conversation? I don't want to introduce any new thoughts or ideas 15 minutes before the session. I can share something, but also I'll look at something, my notes, bring in some stuff, all that. How would you like to spend this time? Nowadays,
doubts and conversations.
Okay. Nowadays, there's sometimes they say in movies, they're creating this with the new technology where when you're watching it, you can choose the kind of ending that you want. And they have alternative endings. So here it is something like that. You've got 15 minutes. You can choose what kind of last pathway do you have. Okay, so you want Vijayan, doubts and clarification. What about the rest of you? I noticed there are 31 people, and I'm very, very happy to see you on a Sunday morning.
Conversations.
Okay, you can put it in the chat box, and you can do a quick kind of a summary of what people are saying on the chat box. Can you just put it in the next 1 minute or 30 seconds? What would you like? Would you like to do a breakout activity? Yes or no? Or would you like this conversation? Just put in those one words, and then we'll go in. What I would like to do is actually also meet people whom we haven't met, in the course online and haven't had a chance to speak. I will take Yukta's help in finding such people. Whenever you speak, you can put on a video if you can. That'd be wonderful. Okay. So Siddharth, I'm going to hold on to you for a moment because I have met you offline also. I will take your question, but let me also, Vijay, Siddharth, people that I've heard on, and Mr. Arun Kumar, Mr. Anil Bhatnagar, Venkat, Himangi. Wonderful to see your very active participation, but please allow me to also see whether there's anybody else so that we have a chance to bring more people into the conversation. Yukta, could you just check? Is there anybody other than the names that I took who would like to come in with a question or with any kind of comment? If I see it on the chat, I can respond to it as well also. I'm seeing almost everybody who has spoken or punched in messages on the chat box talking of conversation. So yes, I also believe that we will not achieve much with a very short breakout activity because The value of a breakout activity is also in the debriefing. If you don't have a good debriefing time to do that, then the activity sometimes doesn't work. So we need a certain minimum time. Okay, so is there anybody other than, I'm repeating, otherwise we'll go with the people who expressed the desire to intervene, Siddharth, Vijayant, and the people who have been more active in terms of participation, Mr. Anil Bhatnagar, Mr. Arun Kumar, sometimes not today as much, Himangi a bit today, and so on. Other than that, anybody who wants to have a chance to speak? Yukta, will you just check on that? For some reason, I cannot look at the chat box. If anybody wants to say, you can raise your hand or put it into the chat box as well. If we don't say anything, then let us go, beginning with the question that I saw the first hands up from Siddharth. Siddharth, and then Siddharth is now, I think, disappeared, confronting me with a black box, but he's arrived back again. Siddharth, and then I think Mr. Bhatnagar again has a question, and then we sort of take it from there. Yeah.
Sir, it's not a query or something. It is just curious or something to know about your education background, where you have pursued a degree in which field, in the PG and the PhD and all. So I would like to utilize this 10 minutes for that. If you would like.
We'll come to that at the end, because I don't want to make it very individual. I will share with you. Happy to do that at the end. I think MNU did probably share with you a profile. So I don't know. Usually they do, so they might have done that. Just check on that. But I'll be happy to talk for a few minutes. But I'm just going to hold on to that and first take on the the questions for which is related to what we're talking about in this session. Vijayant.
Sir, actually, I had two doubts from yesterday class. So I was not able to get enough time yesterday. So I just wanted to have those then, sir. The
Go
first
ahead.
one, sir.
I may or may not be responding to each question on the spot. Maybe I'll take on all of that. There may be common threads and do that also.
Yeah, very
Yukta, could you
small
make some jottings of the question in case I happen to forget, or you remind me? Go ahead, Vijay.
Sir, should we disclose our BATNA while negotiation with the opposite party in some of the cases to get a better options?
Good question. No answer one way or the other as I see it. From what I have experienced, what I've read, in some situations, some people do, and there are reasons to do that. And sometimes there are equally good reasons not to do it. The reason why people sometimes do would be also a show of power and putting the other side under pressure. If you don't do this, I can go away. Or your competitor is giving me a better deal. Just casually when speaking to somebody that, yes, you're offering me these accessories, but I keep on getting offers. I might have checked out something online, and people keep sending me offers and calling me, where even without me asking, there are these so many more accessories. And here I'm talking to you on the car deal for the last 2 weeks, and I'm struggling to get these accessories. So I let him know or her know that I am aware that there are others in the market, and I have also the ability to begin conversations with them. Right? So sometimes people do it for that. On the other hand, sometimes people will not do it to not reveal the extent of your power. Or there may be a confidentiality issue. If there are like 3 players in the market, the other person would most likely know that out of the 3, you're more likely to talk of one of them more than the other. So if you give any indication that you're in conversation with them, they might also interpret that you're not really committed to the deal, if they know the other person is stronger on some points. So sometimes it could work the other way around. You're going with somebody. For instance, supposing it's a personal situation, you're in a relationship with somebody. Now, it may not be a very good idea to say that, I would like this if we carry on with the relationship. However, if not, I could go and marry somebody else. Now, that may not be taken very well. It would indicate you're simultaneously in a conversation at an advanced stage. You're already having another relationship where you can consider marriage within a week. It would raise questions about your commitment and fidelity. Transit this, navigate this to a business situation or some other situation as well. Right? So you need to play this very carefully. I don't think that's a sort of pat answer, which is either this way or that way. Okay. Other ones?
Very small one.
Yeah, very quick. But would you just hold on to the other one, because I really want to distribute.
Okay.
Just hold on. I've heard one. I'll come back to you, but let's see if anybody else has. Anybody else? You can make a comment as well. It doesn't have to be necessarily a question. This is the time that if you want to have any comments, you can do that as well. Mr. Bhatnagar.
Many of the
my
things
thing-
which you have different points under particular subhead. They
Yeah,
seem to be
Mr.
same.
Kumar, I think Mr. Bhatnagar began to speak. Yeah, will you just give us 30 seconds? Let me just hear him out, and I'm going to come back. I think I'll respond together now. Just let me hear everybody. Yeah, Mr. Bhatnagar, and then Mr. Arun Kumar, and then anybody else again. Yeah.
Sir, I am
Go ahead.
thinking that as far as empathy is concerned, it is more of the mental state or mind. But sympathy, it is more concerned with the physical needs. Of course, it is also having some relationship with the emotions and the feelings, but it has more to do with the physical needs.
I'm going to respond to that in a minute. I would think it'll be probably not a good idea to make that separation because in certain situations, even if it's a mental thing, by being sympathetic to that person, I could do something. I would say more sympathy would kind of have an expectation of more action on my part, that I can actually have sympathy for you. I'm in a better position than you. I'm feeling sorry for you. That element, rather than mental
That
or
is
physical.
what I said, that
So
some
it
of
could
the
be
feelings
I'm
are
feeling
there.
sorry for you, but empathy would be that I'm not feeling sorry for you. You're exactly the same as me. I understand your situation and your state of mind. So I would think empathy is about understanding, awareness and understanding. Sympathy beyond that is also there's some element, not necessarily spoken, of feeling sorry for you. Problem is some people could misinterpret it or interpret it as pity. And some people say, don't pity me. Don't pity me or my situation. I'm challenged, like in that film Sparsh. I'm challenged. It's a difficult word for me. I want your understanding, but I want to deal with you as an equal. Don't pity me. Don't bring that element of superiority, the difference based on which is leading to your feeling of superiority compared to me. That you're in a better position and therefore you can sympathize in the sense of pity. Don't pity me. I don't need your pity. Don't feel sorry for me. Be with me as a friend. See me as an equal friend. That's the way I understand it. Yep. Okay. Mr. Arun Kumar. I did end up actually responding to Mr. Bhatnagar. It was a good question. And before I forgot, and I don't think it'll be mixed up with us. Yeah, go ahead.
I was only, it is only an observation, not a question. Under various subheads of the topic which you have covered today, so there are many elements which appear to be same, at least to me, and so abstract that I'm not able to differentiate among them. I mean, of course, when you speak, I find that yes, there are differences, but they are so subtle and so silent ones that at times I feel that there is no difference. That is just an observation.
Yes. Would you actually tell me one or two of them? Because then I'm able to respond to it.
Actually, when I see the...
You can tell me later. You can... Yeah, go ahead.
I don't have that presentation before me. So in many slides, there is, in not majority of slides, at least 4 or 5 slides, points written one below the other, they were looking to be same, and they were the only thing we were articulating and telling about those points in different ways.
They're linked. They're linked and related. They would not be the same. So there is the word same, there's the word similar, there's the word related. So many of the things are definitely related. Part of the understanding of language, concepts, and things which are complex is that there's subtle differences. Yes, it is subtle. But I think part of the thing that we have to learn and understand here is that precisely that subtlety. Because, you know, if we think of something in black and white, we lose the game.
Right.
So, because part of that understanding is actually take us from a position when we think of this in black and white. Why does that happen? That happens because, you know, till class 10, most of us studied the same subjects. We're different human beings. That is, of course, a separate issue. But in terms of our education and professional experience, just talk about that. As we move class 10 onwards, there are a lot of people who go in the STEM disciplines: science, technology, engineering, maths. Some of those people also go into the world of finance, a lot to do with specifics and concrete things, I guess, spoken in terms of language. The world of facts, technical details, where you can decide things in black and white. 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. A plus B whole squared is equal to A squared plus B squared plus 2AB. There is a sigma, there's an epsilon. There's a certain value for pi. If it is 22 by 7, it is 22 by 7. You're either right or wrong. But there are other aspects of your life that are to do with the human factor and the social factor and culture, which are not defined in black and white, Mr. Kumar. And that's where the subtlety and those fine differences come in. For instance, if I were to ask you, and please allow me, you're elder than me, possibly, I don't know. I'm also quite old. Allow me. Do you love your wife? Do you love her as much as when you first met her? Did you love her as much after 10 years of getting married or 5 years? Does your brother love his wife more than or less than you? On a scale of 1 to 5, where would you place him and you? Is it possible to answer those questions meaningfully? Possibly the answer, in my case, would be no. Those questions are also not meaningful because there's subtlety. However, we all know in a long-standing relationship, there are good times and bad times, there are changes, and no two persons are the same. On paper, every marriage is a marriage. And there's a difference between a wedding and a marriage. A wedding is one evening, khana pina, naach gana, hasi mazak, gift. Marriage is a long-standing thing. You can have a great wedding, like some of the great businessmen of our country spend lots of money, and your marriage may last not 1 year. And other people can have a simple wedding and it can go on for generations, not for generations, but for a whole generation to come up, and another generation of grandchildren to come up. However, for each couple, the word marriage would be different. So there's subtleties. The point I'm trying to make is when you, one important, now I don't know, this may help you, it may not help you to understand this. I think it's useful, it was useful for me at least, I'll tell you my background, to Siddharth's question, to realize that when you look into things like individual mind, psychology, when you look at society, when you look at culture, it is a different paradigm. There is complexity, there is subtlety, there's subtle differences, and we need to understand that. And we are all capable of doing that because we are all human beings. But it's important to realize that. That's why when you do management, it is important to realize you're dealing with people and all of those things come into it. I have a friend who is a very successful investment banker. He is a founder of one of possibly India's biggest one of Asia's biggest one. Super career. He told me when I was teaching at IIM Calcutta, do you teach your students, what do they like? I said they like to do finance. It's supposed to be the finance campus of the country. They like to do finance, get great jobs. Do you teach them history? I said, not much, but why? Does your institute, do they teach history? Calcutta is the premier institute of the country. Do you teach history? I said, no, why? Very important to study history, to do investment banking. I said, why history? He says, it's important to understand the legacy of what has happened in the past. And how do you study the past? Technicals can happen anytime. But do you understand how to analyze and understand the past as you move into the future? So what it does is, it's important for us to expand our mind and our experience and flesh out all of that and not think of it as a binary. So what happens is, it's not the fault, it's because of our life experiences. If I recall right, you've been a general manager at the State Bank of India. And part of the job of a general manager at State Bank, in a very senior position, most of the day you're dealing with specifics. And absolute specific stuff you're making decisions on. Your mind has been trained on that. So what happens is, when you look at anything, you're immediately putting it into a certain kind of broad category. Because in banking, in a lot of things, subtlety will not work. If your rate of interest and the RBI declares something, in terms of interest rate after the board meeting, then this is a specific number and what you have to do. If there's a liquidity problem, if it is SLR or CRR, you need to know what specifics you're dealing with. You have to know. You cannot say, okay, I'm going to go this way or rather than that. At the margin, what am I making? I need to understand that. In the future, what's happening on this particular market, in the foreign exchange FX market or this market, and so on and so forth. So in certain domains, experience programs us to think in a certain way. But to understand this, we need to actually, I think, first of all, understand that here it's not a question of finding easy answers. There are no easy answers. That's overall what I can respond to you. Otherwise, if you were to pull out something specifics, I think I would be able to tell you more. The other is anecdotal. Of course, my response, I'm tempted to say I used to have a Portuguese friend of mine in graduate school, when I was a student abroad, postgraduate abroad. And he used to have a great sense of humor. He used to say, whenever I'm in a session starting, everything is wonderful, everything makes sense. But when I'm out of it, then I realize what is the meaning of this. But when I'm sitting there, it's all making sense. So I've got a crisis in my life. What do I do? But part of the idea is this, that different things come in from different paradigms. They make sense within their own frame. And that is why it's making sense to you. It's not individual. What we have to do is get all these various things and engage with it ourselves and think deep and hard and see what we can derive from that. Some things will make more sense to one person. Something else will make more sense. Something would seem completely useless. Something will seem valuable. You have to run it through your own mind and experience and see what makes sense and what works for you. So it is not a tool picture.
Thank you.
Anybody else has any kind of question? It's past 1:30. We don't want to go too much longer, but yes, one more session next week, and that I will try to do something which is hopefully engaging in terms of activity. Let's see how it goes. But so I don't know whether I'll have time for clarifications or questions. So anybody has a quick one? I don't see any. If not, I don't want to talk too much about myself, but since Siddharth asked, I'll sort of briefly try to respond to what he said. But of course, the priority is about what we're talking about in this session, the module. Anybody has any questions on that? Yukta, will you just check out in the room if you can see? I see, as always, 8 persons. And usually the people that I see are the people that I know. Not new ones as I was hoping. 26 people yet on a Sunday afternoon at 1:35, which is a pleasant surprise. So this is not our lowest number, which was yesterday when we hit 17, I think. So at the moment, we are not doing too badly at 26, class size 52. At least 50% are here on a Sunday afternoon, not bad at all. I assume there are no questions.
Sir, a small question was there, sir.
Yeah, please. I'm very happy. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Sir, yeah. I just posted
you had a second
group
question.
Also.
Yeah. Sorry?
Yeah. I just posted it in the group also. So I just wanted to know if, let us say, we have closed the negotiation now. So are we supposed to have a kind of settlement statement and sign the signature of both the parties in case we want to avoid any dispute at a later stage? Yeah, so although it is not legal, maybe it is not legal and it cannot be challenged anywhere. But I think that should be a kind of settlement statement.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways to think about this. One is at a formal level. If it is within a very specified frame that you're talking about, in the frame of arbitration or in the frame of mediation, then there will be a formal requirement as to what you're required to do in terms of a written statement. If it is not that, if it is just a business negotiation that you're in many situations, especially if the context is that you're trying to solve a problem, or I would say if there's a financial aspect to it or a legal aspect, potentially a legal aspect to it, whether it goes into regular litigation or ADR, or if there is a promise being made into the future, right? I would recommend that you have some kind of a written agreement. You don't need stamp paper, written agreement would hold. However, if there is something which is more subtle, can you hear me? Can you all hear me? Are you able to hear?
Yeah. Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yeah. So if there is something which is more subtle, which is to do what we have called the human element here, sometimes which is more sensitive, then people may precisely not like to put it onto an agreement in written words, right? So it may be good to judge the context. So there may be certain situations where it is not a good idea to put it into agreement. For instance, if you look at a family context, there is, under the case of the Supreme Court, now people do a family agreement. And a family agreement is important and good to do sometimes, okay, in terms of whether it's property and other things. However, in certain situations for a family, somebody may not want to put it into an agreement, because there are very sensitive relationships involved. Because they will say, oh, you don't believe me. So broadly, what I would say, in a business situation, and unless there is a reason or the culture of the industry dictates against it, then don't, you could do some kind of a written agreement or create some kind of paper for it. Unless you think for some reason the other party or yourself would interpret this to be a lack of trust, and or if it is dealing with something which is subtle, which is to do with the human element, which you really cannot put down on the paper. I mean, if you put down on the paper that you're not going to be rude to me, you can put it down. But then somebody would not know what to do. Unless you say, okay, there's been some unacceptable usage of language during our previous interactions. So from now on, both the organizations will ensure that it assigns people for the negotiations who are aware of the codes and expectations of regular professional behavior in terms of language, etiquette, gender relations, respecting diversity, equity, inclusion considerations, so on and so forth. You can do that. So that's basically it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. I don't think anybody else is there. We have 24 people. Siddharth is still there. Okay, quick one on you want to know about my background. Okay. My background has got a couple of different elements. So I have a dual background, an academic and industry background. Academically, my degrees, I'm talking of only my master's and postgraduate degrees and beyond, not before that. My first degree was in economics from the Delhi School of Economics. And then my second degree was from the University of Massachusetts in the United States. The first was in economics, the second degree was in communications. And my doctoral work was from the National Law School, University at Bangalore, NLS Bangalore, in the interdisciplinary area of constitutional law, media and communication law, policy and regulations. Okay, so that was the intersection in which I also touched base with learnings from political science and sociology, and all this whole development studies and so on. So that's my academic background. In terms of my professional background, I worked for more than 15 years in the media industry in senior leadership positions, India Today, Times of India, Star TV, Indian Express. I set up a company for Indian Express. I was the CEO of that long years back, and so on and so forth. Did I forget any? There'll be a couple of others too. I had an entrepreneurial phase where I used to run my own firm for a couple of years, working again in the media, specifically in television and so on. And then I returned back to academia because abroad in Massachusetts, I was very much into research on particular areas that were of interest to me. So I came back to academics again with a professorial position at the SPJ Institute of Management and Research in Mumbai. And then I went on to the Indian Institute of Management in Calcutta when they opened up an area, and I was a tenured faculty member there, professor there for many years, working in the area of communication and also communication management, also doing a lot of executive teaching in the area in which I'm talking to you, which is conflict resolution, negotiations. Also did talk negotiations at SPJ. And then, I've moved to Mumbai now, about a year back. I did some work, as one of the director heading up a function for a global organization which works on sustainability and environment. And I've just come out of them because of some work-life balance issues and time issues and travel issues. And the plan has been there for a year to do portfolio work, which is both to do with academia and industry in consulting, and also academic work like I'm doing with you. So that's the whole idea.
I just tried your profile on LinkedIn.
Yeah, you tried or you checked? You mean you checked? I can't hear you. You're in mute. Vijayant, you're in mute.
Yeah.
You said LinkedIn. I heard you. You said you tried my.
I checked. Yeah, I checked, but the profile was not updated, I think, sir. Or maybe I was searching for some different profile.
No, it is updated. Updated in terms of updated in what terms you did not find updated?
If you can share the link in the chat box, sir, if you have.
No, it's updated. It's updated, but it's not detailed. I don't like to do LinkedIn detailed profiles.
Just there was one mentioned, the professor at SPJ. Only
No,
one
no,
profession
then
was.
you're okay. No, it's all,
Okay.
all my positions are mentioned, all
Okay.
my
I will search
academic
again.
qualifications, all my academic qualifications and all the principal roles. You know, there've been many, but there've been all the principal roles are mentioned.
Okay, I'll search
Yeah.
again. Sir. Thank you.
Okay. So that is it good to go at the moment?
Yes.
Literally to go? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I assume there is no other question or clarification. We are going to meet for the last session on 31st. What I'll be trying to do an activity at a more formal level with you. I would request you to run through what we have done and at least have the main concepts and ideas, ready for you, because it would be an application of all of that in that exercise. When you did the breakout activity yesterday, that was something based on your experience, a shorter one. Here, there will be something slightly more, not slightly, much more, if I can do what I want to do, structured, but let's see whether we can do it. So either we'll do that or we'll do a regular session without the breakout activity of that kind, an exercise, and with more inputs. That's the plan. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you so
Enjoy.
very much and happy time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's somebody speaking. There was a lady speaking. Let's hear that. There was a lady who spoke up, and I think we ran over.
Shivangi ma'am was there, I think.
No, it's Dr. Tanuja.
Yeah.
I said thank you and happy times.
Thank you. I cannot see you. Your video is not there. So I'm sorry, Dr.
Because I'm
Tanuja. I missed you.
traveling.
That's
No,
all
no,
right.
I'm traveling and I'll be out of town for a couple of days. That's the reason I'm not on right now.
That's
but
all
I was
right.
listening keenly. Thank you.
All
Very,
right.
very informative. Happy times.
Thank you. I was in fact thinking whether you're there because some of the things we're talking about are related to your area of work, and I was hoping to get some inputs from you in terms of participation. But I thought it's a Sunday, so you must be busy. So that's all right.
No. I was very tempted to talk, but at that point I was sitting with some people and I couldn't.
That's
these commitments are made like a year ago and I can't avoid them. That's the challenge.
Of course, all of us. Yeah. We all have to lead our lives. We all have to lead our lives. We have to.
So thank you for understanding.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. Well, all the best for the rest of your Sunday and the week. And then we'll meet you. We'll meet next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. So hopefully we can have exercise in the next session.
Who's that speaking?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
It's Swati.
I don't see you. Swati, yes, Swati. Can you have your video on? I can see. It's so good to see Deepa and other people also, other faces on my screen other than that. Okay, so Himangi, see. Swati, can you have your video on? It'll be so nice in case you're comfortable. Yeah.
Sir.
Hi, Swati. Yeah, please do tell
Hi,
me.
sir. So hopefully we can have the exercise in the next session.
Let me give the game away. The game away is this. There are certain very good games actually in the area of negotiation. I'm hoping to do one. Some of them require some kind of permissions in terms of the material to be used. If we are able to get that, all right, then we'll do the formal one. Otherwise, we will not do it. Okay?
Yes,
we'll do a simulation of that with whatever we have.
Yes,
but if we are able to do it, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Anytime
Yes.
that I've been able to do it, and I've run it many times, it is really of value, and it's also great fun doing it. It involves role playing, and it's very specific role playing, and you engage in a negotiation with the other side, and then we also do some debriefing. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank
Thank
you,
you so much, Swati, for coming in and saying what you did, and thank you to the rest of you too. So we are closing the session. Bye.
Bye.